Good evening, Chicago. This is Jerry Vasilatos with Jose Requena. Have we got you there, Jose? Is your audio working?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can hear you
terrific.
just fine. Can you hear me?
I can
Good.
hear you. Yeah. Just went into the intro here. So, welcome to another episode of Fear and Loathing in the Windy City with Jose and I. Um, we were just talking about this before the show. I normally take to Twitter and Facebook to post updates on the fact that we're going live in a half hour, 15 minutes. No problems putting stuff on Twitter. Went to Facebook to post to our Hard Lens page as well as my own page, and forgot 3 days ago, two things happened on my end with Facebook, because I'm a big Facebook poster. Got into a debate with another movie fan over the Zack Snyder movie universe and the toxic fandom. And in going back and forth, he's a total nerd alert, everybody. He's in the camp for Robert Pattinson that hates the Zack Snyder movie universe, and I'm a big Zack Snyder fan and Ben Affleck Batman fan. So we get into this pissing match back and forth. And at the end, I mean, he did initiate it and trolled me. And at the end, I made my point, and to just end things, I said, now run away, little doggy. That's what I said. 3-day suspension. 3-day suspension because Facebook identifies that as bullying and harassment. Additionally, I had posted a link to the Lakeshore Drive recut that I did that overdubs Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable Drive in the lyrics as a joke that we posted a month ago in regards to what happened with City Council this week. And in a lot of the news threads, I posted the music video as a gag, and Facebook identifies it as spam. So completely relevant to the conversation about Lakeshore Drive, and Facebook describes it as spam. So I have a 3-day timeout on Facebook, which means I was not able to post our show links to our Hardlands Facebook page, my page, or the Hardlands Media discussion group on Facebook, because I guess I'm just a Facebook renegade, bullying and harassing people and spamming everybody with a video link that has everything to do with what the topic was at hand. It's just astonishing how Facebook has got this artificial intelligence that lacks any ability to take things in context or make a fair value assessment or judgment. They just program things. And I think what also happens is, if you've gotten people reporting your posts in the past, I mean, look, we all get into heated debates on Facebook, but invariably a lot of people will post the report button on something you post, even if it's not offensive. And, Facebook keeps tabs of these things. So even when you're in an innocuous conversation, I have no doubt that this guy was debating with decided to report me, and Facebook automatically identified my "now run away, little doggy" comment, which, is ball busting, as bullying and harassment. Therefore, I got an automatic 3-day Facebook jail suspension. So everyone who's watching before the show, I mentioned this to Jose, and you had mentioned some similarly minded cancel culture drama happening on Twitter. I think that's a little bit more intense, though, as it relates to progressive and left voices that are participating in their camps on Twitter. And why don't you go ahead and share with us what you were telling me about?
Well, yeah. I mean, your Facebook story, I think it speaks to the limitations and the current crackdown on free speech that is going on Facebook. That is social media. The last decade, Facebook was still rather new. A lot more, 60 plus people were just finally starting to join it and understand it. It just finally became political last decade. Now it's like a standard of life. And now it's a lot more regulated, it seems. The kind of speech is allowed there, and the precursor to this online news kind of junket was TYT, and the kind of drama that they've been embroiled in lately. I've been trying to not weigh in as much. I mentioned I was like helping other streams that wanted, you know, like I was on them and they have different takes on it. But it's definitely it's a factor in the discourse, just because he always looking for it's just TYT was like kind of like the people that were like, we're doing something online and it's going to affect IRL, and then social media and more YouTube shows have, you know, spawned and like taken off, you know, like from that kind of mindset.
Jose,
and now,
what is
kind of happened.
what is IRL? I got lost there, and when you mentioned IRL,
Oh, sorry, in real life. I was just kind
in
of
real life.
using
Okay,
internet.
okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, you know, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I just want to point out, like, you know, Iranian state TV, quote unquote, press TV, they do progressive shows, you know, news, and it's usually, you know, on par with what Al Jazeera does, you know, like in terms of like trying to vet, you know, their sources and backgrounds. You know, they were the U.S. government censored this private media company in order for like to obfuscate a lot of the news that we would be getting otherwise from different sources, while there was unilateral attack from the United States. There was a bombing, you know, in Iraq of Iranian-backed militias. You know, we can only take what the state is saying at face value, and given their track record, you know, it's hard to say to their face that, you know, we don't believe you. We kind of think you're lying, but that's kind of like, you know, I think that's a reasonable position, you know, of apprehension for people to have. And the internet, you know, right?
It's not like the track record, right?
Right, you know, or you know, just within our lifetime. It's not, you know, like that's the thing. It's not like it's like a couple of times during our lifetimes. It's like it's what they do. So it's like it's hard to like not call the U.S. government a bunch of liars, but
propaganda. It's propaganda to control the narrative.
Right. I just wanted to bring all that up because, like, social media, like kind of the online media sphere and its great possibilities, you know, at its highest levels, I think would have been, you know, present during, you know, this past couple of months of the U.S. just bombing the Middle East again, you know, under a different regime, under a different administration, and you know, continuing this normalization of, you know, of violence. Social media, you know, internet media was supposed to give voice to people on the ground to challenge those narratives, or at least give us, give anybody that can do something about these situations, you know, a perspective they wouldn't be receiving from mainstream outlets that are curated to you know, generate kind of like what does Chomsky say? Manufacture consent.
Manufacture,
you know?
consent. Yeah, manufacture consent.
Media. Yeah, so like we know that corporate media, mainstream media, state-led media has an endeavor to normalize the actions of whoever's funding them. You know, the idea of social media would be to normalize the solidarity and humanity within all of us. And, you know, I think that, I don't know, leftist social media discourse lately, you know, it's losing track of that. That sucks to see, definitely.
It's been a big cancel culture free-for-all.
A lot of cancellations all around, yeah.
From the left, primarily. Although we did see, I think that what we saw on Facebook with them coming down harder on people was a result of what was happening while Trump was in office, especially around the time of the Capitol insurrection and following that is when they and they canceled him. They pulled him off social media. You know, no matter what you think of Trump, and I think he's a POS. I mean, I'm not a fan of Trump. People know what he is. People can see what he is. When you decide to take away his platform, then of the most, arguably the most at the time, powerful leader in the world, you've pretty much opened the gates to being able to cancel out and censor everybody. And this is what we're seeing happening now with these minor innocuous things on Facebook to people reporting things on Twitter as a matter of people debating and disagreeing just to shut the other side up now. It's really, really gotten out of control.
Yeah. No, the cancellation of Trump on social media has led a massive black hole of shit posting power. That's just, it's getting, that's the void that I see that's getting filled. Trump would rail, through not just, like social media trolls, but like establishment media. Like, CNN could say, no, that's not true. And he's like, yeah, it is. And, even like, I think a lot of people were just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what to believe, because CNN's not really, hasn't a great track record with us and is out to get him. And, we know that he, anything that gets reported on what he says, even what he says is always kind of like not serious and, subject to change at any given moment. And then it gets reported on rather inaccurately and, pretty much to undermine him. It was a really rough environment, for social media where trolling and just energy and activity was the only way to kind of like muscle through Trump's influence on the whole sphere. I do think, I do want to walk back. I don't want to walk back. I was somebody that celebrated Trump getting kicked off social media because I saw how disempowering that would be to him. Yeah. Him specifically, one of the most powerful people in the world, that had, a global business empire that he was much more concerned about than, handling COVID.
It was knocking down the bully on the playground finally, and I think we all enjoyed it. But then
sorry, go ahead.
But then it opened up this ripple effect. If you can do it to him, then you can do it to everybody, and without actual valid reasons. Given he was literally riling people up to go do his bidding and try to overturn the election results.
I think that's it. There's not going to be another Trump anytime soon unless Facebook and Twitter enable someone else to do exactly what Trump did. And it would be really beneficial for everybody, even him, if he was like a one-off in this kind of sphere. But I like, to your point, like, I think that Trump is more than just a bully. I think that he was kind of a very desperate con man that had just fallen ass backwards into a ton of power. All of it, driven by cunning to defend himself and absolve himself historically of his ills and sins. And, so like, I mean, like, a pretty cartoon villain kind of character, and he loved playing into it. So like, and there was real ramifications for him playing into it. So there was that going on with them. But to your point, like, who else is going to have that much power on social media again, to influence an election results, to get 70 million people, agitated enough to really consider, like, should we just call it like this democracy's fake? We were cheated out, and maybe it's time that we do something crazy. Like, this is the president of the United States using his platform to do that. Now that he's off Twitter, now that he's off Facebook, I think that the reality of like what he is as a political project is been better highlighted this year. But also the impact that he's had on social media as like this force of like inaccurate information that just was a huge center of gravity in discourse. I do think that this year's been a mess in discourse, but I think, I'm hoping that it's only been out of necessity so that people get a better feel of what people's, focus and endeavors are with these online tools and how they're being used to carry this narrative of a people's towards total liberation. Donald Trump was a joke in all of that endeavor, and I almost feel like the billionaire class allowed him to be president, as a joke because of his toxic impact on social media.
They questioned if he even wanted it or if he was just trying to market his Trump TV channel when he inevitably, unwittingly ended up winning, and obviously wasn't going to step back because he's never going to, acknowledge that he's not the best, or even if it wasn't something. Yeah, well, not that the first time out when he won, there was a lot of commentary behind the scenes that his original campaign was unintended. It was just to capture the spotlight for his business ventures. Then once he won, he couldn't back out. To this point about his censorship on social media, I think it's hilarious too, because he's such an attention whore. He's like a child. He doesn't have that platform anymore. But much like the Patriot Act, the genie was let out of the bottle with them deciding, well, they can take him off social media. He's the president. They can run roughshod over everybody now, much in the way the Patriot Act was for our own good. And we've seen how that's been abused since the 9/11 attacks. So I don't want to it's just an interesting topic to step back and reflect on, is when it comes down to something as simple as wanting to update your social media feeds to promote our show. And it all comes down to this crazy culture of censorship that's been happening now because of what's happening in politics and the news. Let me add the screen to the stream. Oh, got to get rid of that. That was me trying to post. And there's your message couldn't be sent because it includes content that other people on Facebook have reported as abusive. Thanks, Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, right. God almighty. I guess I get too into my fandom. But let me shift into our first story here that I wanted to share with our audience. Let me get our banners off here. This came across my attention. I thought it was very, very important. And I would really encourage everybody who's been affected this past year from the COVID-19 quarantines and shutdowns that have fallen behind on their rent. The Illinois Housing and Development Authority is offering grants to cover your rent that goes back as far as 15 months to help you catch up. And I'll read a little bit from the page. And the link to this program is down in our show notes, so you can go there and apply if you need this kind of assistance. The Illinois Rental Payment Program is an emergency rental assistance program designed to support households in Illinois that are unable to pay rent due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The tenant-led application period for the Illinois Rental Payment Program is now open. You may start your application at the link provided. Tenants have until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, July 18th to complete their portion of the application. Tenants will also be provided a pathway to complete their application should they have unresponsive landlords. The applicants are eligible for up to 15 months of assistance. The grant can cover the past due rent from the previous 12 months and future rental assistance for the next 3 months, if deemed necessary. The maximum grant amount is $25,000. The emergency rental assistance is provided by the federal government and is free to tenant and housing provider. If approved, the grant will be paid to the housing provider in the form of a check. In order to receive financial assistance through ILRPP, tenants must meet all of the following. Household is at risk of homelessness or housing instability, i.e. household received a past due rent or eviction notice, despite the moratoriums. Household lives in Illinois and rents their home as their primary residence. Household's total income cannot exceed 80% area median income for location. Household must have experienced a financial hardship directly or indirectly due to the pandemic, for example, being laid off, place of employment is closed, reduction in hours of work, loss of spousal child support, inability to find work due to COVID-19, having to stay home with children due to the closure of daycare school, unable to participate in previous employment due to the workplace's high risk of severe illness from COVID-19. Now, they do have some documentation requirements. Housing providers that also have to fill out the application to help their tenants must provide evidence of past due rent, copy of 2019 property tax bill or 2021 monthly mortgage statement, grant payment information for check distribution, current signed lease if available, SSN or ITIN, employment identification number, rental unit information, fully executed in current property management agreement if payment is made to a property manager. Tenants only need to provide a government-issued photo ID, a utility bill or proof of address if the address on your ID is not your current address, monthly rent and amount past due, proof of household income in 2020, proof of public assistance, if applicable, valid email address, and proof of immigration status or social security number is not required. Now, I ran through that very, very fast, just in the interest of time. However, what I've pulled up here on the screen, all that information is available at the link that we do have down below, which leads you to the application. I can't imagine landlords across Chicago during the pandemic and the rent and eviction moratorium wouldn't want to assist their tenants in applying for this program so that they can collect the rent that many tenants were unable to pay due to hardships related to COVID and the pandemic. So I really encourage everybody to check out this program since they opened it up this week, and hopefully you can get some relief. It's one of the good things that our government has put forth and offered to provide some relief due to economic hardship related to COVID-19. So I hope that this information is helpful to everybody, especially in light of chatter now of landlords thinking about evictions and property taxes going up now, and landlords not being able to keep up with property taxes on top of the fact that tenants have not been able to pay their rents during the moratorium. So I think that's some hopefully helpful information that everyone can benefit from. And again, links below. I want to, however, hand it back off to Jose. Whoops.
Yep.
I thought I was handing back over to Jose, who had some good stories that he wanted to bring to our attention and discuss on tonight's Fear and Loathing in the Windy City broadcast. So, Jose, I'll pass it along to you. And I'll bring up the screen with the story links as you wish for me to share them.
Yeah, the Democracy Now! Link.
We'll have that up right.
Just have that graphic at least.
There we go.
Yeah. There we are. I mean, that was awesome. There's rental assistance happening in Illinois. Hopefully it fares better than the Cook County or the Chicago housing relief that we saw during, pre-pandemic. They were trying to give rental assistance to people. They had thousands of applicants and only like a few dozen were honored. So I'm hoping, the state fares better. Now we're seeing this is Cook County nurses, Cook County workers on strike for better pay and affordable health care. This past week, starting from Thursday on, 2,000 healthcare workers in Cook County, Illinois are on strike demanding affordable health care and better pay, including temporary bonuses for frontline workers, those COVID bonuses that were, those essential worker hero pay. Are not really being honored. Friday's strike by Service Employees International Union Local 73 came a day after 1,200 Chicago area nurses held a one-day strike to demand safe staffing levels in Cook County hospitals and clinics. So Cook County nurses are striking. Cook County workers are now in a prolonged strike in solidarity with them. These are the essential workers. They were working schools, they're working libraries, they're working the parks. This is custodial staff, this is landscaping staff, this is nursing staff. 73 encompasses a wide swath of city workers. And they're usually augmenting, needed civic services like hospitals, like schools, like parks, like libraries. So these are the frontline, essential workers that basically kept Cook County running. Any success that J.B. Pritzker, Tony Preckwinkle, or Lori Lightfoot wants to stump on, about their region doing better than most, is thanks to these workers. And they have to go on strike to just get, what was promised to them honored, let alone, do the right thing and just try to have a better quality of life for their members. I'm hoping that, this isn't a prolonged strike. Tony Preckwinkle, there's a weird power dynamic between the county, the city, and the state. The governor and the mayor had press conferences just a block away from each other during the same hour, and did not mention or attend each other's press conferences. Or there's oddball politics going on like that at the moment, and that those are the small windows of opportunity that workers can pick up on the tensions to highlight what they need right now, and hopefully somebody notices and sits down and signs a new contract with them.
Are there any updates? This is kind of related, but not related. But we talked last week on the teacher layoffs, and I know that a lot of the Cook County workers were in solidarity with the teachers that were laid off. Any news from that union?
Nothing major. It seems like it's going to go on a case by case basis. Definitely, that's where CTU lawyers get involved, and people kind of take a fine tooth comb to the rule books and. For each situation, nothing that I've heard about some of the more egregious cases, having any kind of conclusion yet. No.
Okay. Because I remember we talked about nurses last week, and that reminded me of the teachers' plight, and I just figured it would be good to check if there's an update. Not yet, but all right. Well, we're just going to have to keep monitoring that situation. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I wanted to share this strike situation just because, Chicago's essential workers are, even pre-pandemic, because of gentrification, we're in a pretty hard place. Even the people that had something, during the pandemic here in Chicago, are still not made whole. So that's kind of where we're at.
Gotcha. I kind of jumped the gun on the next story. Sorry, I'll bring that screen up.
Go for it.
Regarding speedy trials.
Yeah.
You still don't have the right to a speedy trial. I didn't realize that. Well, I guess the wheels of justice do grind slowly here, but I just thought this headline was kind of funny.
It was an interesting headline. I like the focus on the state apparatus of a speedy trial, because Tony Preckwinkle really backs Kim Foxx, which has been a source of derision for Chicago police and a lot of law and order minded camps. Even Lori Lightfoot's getting in on it and trying to blame Cook County's COVID's process for crime spikes. I think they'll find anything as a narrative, besides capitalism and what it naturally does for crime in Chicago.
Yeah.
But this is basically talking about the court system in Illinois in general. Having an issue with a speedy trial has been the linchpin in what's been causing more crime and our criminal justice system. Sorry, there's one.
Did you want me to scroll down to something, or do you have this up on your screen also?
I have it up on my screen. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll just leave this static then.
Yeah, so as of June 15th, there were about 5,300 people in Cook County Jail detained pre-trial, up from 4,350 last year. More than 2,000 people have been incarcerated at the jail for a year or longer. A year in jail, waiting trial. According to the Cook County Sheriff's Office, there are nearly 3,500 people in custody through electronic monitoring at the end of last week. So on top of 5,300 people inside the jail, you still have 3,500 people on electronic monitoring that you are, liable for. Last Monday, Cook County Circuit Chief Timothy Evans convened a committee with representatives from Cook County State Attorney's Office, the Cook County Sheriff's Office, Cook County Public Defender's Office, and other stakeholders to devise a way to shrink the backlog, expand in-person proceedings in the criminal courts, and hold more bench and jury trials. Evans said in a statement, the group is preparing for the eventual return of speedy trial rights, so that the constitutional and statutory rights of defendants can be protected. So, Illinois was not the only state to suspend speedy trial rights on the onset of the pandemic. Without being able to safely bring jurors into a courtroom, judges and state legislators across the country threw out speedy trial statutes to give their courts some breathing room. Most states have been slow to restore the rule, even as they lift pandemic restrictions, said Ishna Rasham, Vice President of Advocacy and Partnership Nonprofit Vera and Justice. Some states have extended the suspension of those rights into the future. Kansas Governor Laura Kelly recently signed a bill suspending speedy trial rights until May of 2023. Many states are urging people to come back to work, to invest in the economy, and to get life as normal. And yet we haven't seen any of that urgency or pressure when it comes to the criminal legal system or courts, said Rahman. Since resuming jury rights in March, the Cook County Circuit Court has only summoned jurors for 23 felony trials in 3 months, according to court spokesperson. That's far below the court's pre-pandemic rate in 2019. The court completed 223 felony jury trials, so 23 compared to 223 pre-pandemic. That's where we're at. So, this is an issue that, does not have any clear solution other than kicking the can down the road, and like Kansas is doing. This is the time where elected officials, could be giving leeway to a lot of what activists like Jamal Green are trying to do to, in their communities to mitigate violence and get youth, involved in something positive. Instead, I think that, this backlog of trials is going to be an excuse to give more funding to a criminal justice system that is mostly bent on caging and surveillancing people than really rehabilitating and having a safe society. So
instead of the public defenders, we spoke about public defenders a few weeks back, and the Sharon Mitchell Jr. was appointed in March. He's actually mentioned in this article as the Cook County Public Defender. He came from the Illinois Justice Project, where he was director and worked to help pass the landmark criminal justice reform bill that will end cash bail in Illinois. But I think we were talking in that previous show about the fact that where more money is going to be going into the prison system as opposed to the defense that's allotted indigent. God, I'm losing my sense of words here. Indigent clients that need public defenders to provide a speedier trial and get the system moving faster. Yeah. So
this capitalism systems of criminalizing the poor, and coercing people to work, through the necessities they need for life, medicine during a pandemic, housing, during a massive heat wave, shelter, food, it's distressing to see that, it's still normalized. The brutality of the large scale amount of trauma and violence that capitalism normalizes is still normal. It's still normal during the pandemic.
The pandemic really pulled the veil aside for people to really reevaluate things that they were too distracted or unaware of because of just the normal cycle of how things are. And, once you have a crisis like this, that affects, jobs. We're talking a moment ago about rental relief, even the basic civil right of having a speedy trial here. And there's been a lot for people to digest now that life's had to slow down this past year, and been affected by the pandemic.
Yeah.
Should I move on to our next headline?
Yeah.
This is a sad one. Oh, and of course the Sun Times wants us to. Oh, okay. There we go. I thought they were going to block us because I don't have a subscription to the Sun Times. Or what the heck? I guess they're going to
Oh,
throw
hey,
advertisements at us. Oh, no, that's not
that's
it.
a good $90 to spend on 3 hours of spending in line to see 5 minutes of a. Oh, I thought it was a Shed Aquarium ad. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. No, there we go. All right. More shootings, unfortunately. This is a tragic story. There was a pregnant woman, I believe, that was shot over the weekend.
Yeah.
More mass shootings. I will let you share the details.
There was a general theme of ideas with the stories that I shared, to you. Essential workers need to go on strike. Speedy trials kind of on a standstill in Illinois. Hopefully this rental assistance program helps more people than not, but we're seeing, the violence in Chicago, which is perennial. Not only is it, happening, at a great degree, it's going to be, as it always does, weaponized in the media to have less than desirable policies, but doesn't make these situations, this shouldn't be normal. I feel like the city of Chicago has no love left. I think that's a little harsh, Mayor, but I mean, that is definitely a vibe in the areas of the city where this happens. There was 2 mass shootings where more than 10 people. There has been at least 10 attacks where 4 or more people were shot in Chicago. About a third of the 7 to 8 people shot between Friday and early Monday were wounded in just 4 attacks. 7 to 8 people wounded in just 4 attacks. A lot of media has been, in Chicago goes through gun violence, and there's a lot of different ways, that people want to analyze it. We definitely want to, respect the people that are going through a lot of, heartbreak in the city that unfortunately has normalized such heartbreak. This didn't happen. This happened not far from me too, but in Marquette Park. And how much of this crime is going to get solved? I want to kind of come down to where the police lieutenant says, as for the weekend attacks, the mayor said Chicago police detectives have some promising leads, though police superintendent David Brown sounded less enthusiastic at a later news conference. Brown said Marquette Park shooting at the 6300 block of South Artisan stemmed from a year-long gang conflict in which gunmen were seeking retaliation. Bowie was an innocent bystander. Well, one of the wounded men were targeted. He said the shooter's car was seen, but the detectives have no license plate or description of the shooters, Brown said.
And the article also says that it was gang members apparently out for revenge fired into the crowd. Innocent people in a crowd, and just they're out for revenge, and then everyone else suffers.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like the leads are the best that the neighborhood people and I suspects could ascertain as to what was happening. No one's in custody. This kind of circles back to how we started the program. I hope, and I mentioned, I don't know how much longer I really want to be a social media person, because there's people that are doing effective work. And my hope with social media news stories has always been that we have enough narratives on the ground that, situations like this that seem perennial are not normalized. That people have a platform to share their own stories and tease out what really happened. I don't have a link to share with you right now. One of the things that's being discussed in some of these neighborhoods now there's like community meetings within the city. If people would be want drones to monitor their neighborhoods, or at least be made available, in the event of a mass shooting, for a drone that can travel up to 100 miles per hour to be on site to catch shooters. So that's that was a
That,
scary. Yeah.
that's what they're proposing, but the city has already invested millions in cameras on light poles literally at every corner. So I'm
Right.
a little confused on how they think drones are going to solve the problem unless they're going to have live operators that can jump into a neighborhood. That just sounds like more pandering when it appears to me that they do have the tools available with the existing cameras. I'm not quite sure how mobile drones are going to solve a problem unless you've got somebody there that sees the perps are running away and is able to like program the drone to follow them. I'm
It's
not
a slippery
quite
slope to
clear
normalize.
their logic. Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, this is a state that normalized red light cameras
Yeah.
because people were asking for it. You know,
Now,
um,
now nobody wants them now that they've been abused the way that they've been abused because they're not about safety anymore. It's about revenue.
right? Those blue light cameras were up there because communities have asked for them. How well have they been used? They've been up there, and how much crime do they stop? We've seen that.
I
So
always find
this
it
is
interesting.
extreme.
The red light cameras always work. The blue light cameras
Mhm.
don't. Which one is making more money for the city? Just asking.
Right.
Just putting it out there.
Yeah.
What are the priorities?
So yeah, now the city wants to, if a community, that is seeing, such normalized heartbreak is asking for drones, you can see that being normalized too. And that was something I always feared being normalized because that's game over in the gentrification game. That's criminalizing any and everything in the neighborhood and in the urban space. And, all the taxpayers within that space paying into a heavy surveillance as a rule because they don't trust their neighborhoods, which is something that feeds into kind of an ugly philosophy of humanity that I'd rather not be empowered. But Chicago's pretty expert at empowering such fear and loathing amongst people's amongst different neighborhoods. Chicago saw a lot of domestic terrorism and violence between neighbors, during political hot flashed moments in history. And my hope was that, gentrification didn't just cover up so much of that narrative history that people in Chicago can share, that I think actually lends a more complete picture of like what America is and could be, and is culminating into if it wasn't so micromanaged. How do we stop systemic violence like this? I don't think it's drones, but I wanted to share this story just because there's an awful story like this after every weekend in Chicago. But we also can see how a community that is inundated with violence and no answers from police, from the government, from City Hall, would be open to anything at this point, including a drone.
I hadn't heard about the drone angle till you brought it up tonight, and like many other things, I can only imagine the cost and how some companies that are close to our civic leaders are going to be getting those taxpayer dollars to fund the drone program and provide and add to the gentrification issues that you're talking about.
Yep, I'm just gonna share the link with you on the private chat if you want to share with
Yeah, I can bring it
the
up here.
audience. Yeah.
I'm going to bring it up in our browser here and see if the Tribune or the Sun Times will allow me to.
My Scout, spelled kind of Germany, a private Chicago-based aerial security company. They're pushing this as a solution. Yeah.
There it is. Interesting. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We see you. We're recording you right now. We see everything that you're doing. Alderman Roderick Sawyer envisioned a booming voice emitted from a drone. It's like we're going into a Hollywood movie now. I mean, seriously, this is the stuff we saw in movies in the 1990s, right?
Yeah.
It's all coming true, all prescient. Jeez.
Yeah.
The idea, employ the use of video-equipped drones that could travel up to 100 miles per hour and be on location within minutes to provide an eye-in-the-sky presence to fight crime. So blue light cameras that are supposed to be monitors are supposed to essentially, you're at this corner, and you see the perp going that way, so the camera at the next corner following that direction is supposed to then like track the person. So this proposal of the drones is essentially going to be repeating what the existing corner blue light cameras are supposed to do, as you kind of connect the dots with follow. I mean, that's what we saw. It was the blue light cameras were actually very valuable when they were compared against the police camera videos in the Adam Toledo shooting many months ago. There was the camera that was across the empty lot, and they were also able to kind of track what was happening in the neighborhood with the gunshots. So this whole issue of drones now, I'm quite overkill. I mean, I think from a standpoint of like, I think we do have the tools in place that should be working.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, this heavenly police state of American cities is a liberal dream come true. And, you have sentient robots monitoring, the poor neighborhoods to keep ruffians out. Then the whole city becomes safe and marketable. And that's the dangers of like, yeah.
E-Heller adds, and then of course they're going to want to equip those with tasers or darts. I'll go one further, E-Heller. Have all of you followed the videos coming out of Boston Dynamics with like the Terminator dogs that are running around that they want to use to transport things during wartime? I guarantee you those are going to be weaponized. And at some point, these robots that are being developed by Boston Dynamics, sorry, anybody see the Terminator movie? I mean, I'm being a little melodramatic there, but that's where the technology is going with these robotic applications. I can only imagine how those applications would then be integrated with after drones. I mean, we're pretty soon going to see RoboCop running around. Scrap, a private Chicago-based quote unquote aerial security company would provide the service, which also could potentially be funded by the creation of an additional tax for residents of his ward who'd benefit from the services, Alderman Sawyer said. Sawyer said police can't be in all places at all times and envisioned a booming voice coming from a drone that would disrupt criminal behavior. I'm not sure if he's for this or against it. We see you. We're recording you right now. We see everything you're doing.
For it. I'm not crazy about it.
You're picking your nose right now. We see you, Sawyer said. Drone operators would be able to record video, keeping tabs on people fleeing a crime scene and share information with police. The drones could be coupled with on-the-ground private security officer, Sawyer said. It sounds like he's advocating for this.
Oh yeah, he wants the drones.
Oh my God!
So we gotta see who's donating to his campaign for sure.
Right?
Probably.
Yep.
Operate.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So it's a heartbreaking weekend of violence in Chicago. The mayor is hiding behind the fact that crime is down. I don't blame the mayor for every single bit of crime that happens in the city. I don't think that people should, but this is a perennial problem. If you're a Chicagoan and you're a Chicago leader, having something to say, or at least reaffirming on the solutions being worked towards, would be the only solace that these neighborhoods could have. But we don't get that. Ron Emanuel blamed residents of the West Side when there was a mass shooting during his mayoralship. Mayor Daley knew how to work leaders in different neighborhoods to kind of come around to just shrug things off. But there was also the normalization of a war on gangs during his tenure, so there was only so much empathy to go around. Lori Lightfoot She wants to create this narrative of where these problems come that, none of it is brand new. It seems lazily, coming secondhand from people that just moved into the city. People that have grown up here, that have lived here, that have had the persecution of the state, that had to navigate around, the reality of the state needlessly persecuting them, on top of the crime in the city. I can understand why neighborhoods and people that have roots here and want to leave their kids in the bungalow houses that they've invested in, why they might consider okay, let's trust Alderman Sawyer's crazy drone plan.
We want to feel safe,
right?
Big Daddy's going to protect us,
and that's how Chicago corruption and the relationship between corporate business and our civic leaders. That's how it's always been. So it was only a matter of time before ed tech found its way into all our schools because of Bill Gates. It was only going to be a matter of time before the police business apparatus, all the tools that go into this privatization of security, found a way to get a big government contract without a lot of activist protester drama. This is the most organic way for it to happen, and it's happening. It is a concern. It's also not anything that I can hold against the residents, that have to live.
Well, yeah, they're living in a war zone, and but when you've got the alderman proposing this,
yeah,
unfortunately, I would say not a lot of them have the foresight to see where that kind of a proposal is going to end up going.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the short term to help, as we were talking about earlier with let's take Trump off social media because he's a menace and he's a threat, then suddenly has other repercussions, much like these drones would. With civil rights and other things.
Yeah. And I think that, it's only a war zone because it's there's such a desperation for survival. Because there's wide regions of Chicago that are food deserts, that have no recreational facilities, where unemployment's ridiculously high, where everyone is living on the verge of homelessness. Illinois, Cook County, Chicago, they know what they're doing to these sections of the city. They know it's been under-resourced for a long time. The solutions that are coming from the youth, from the ground up, are not brand new and brilliant genius. It's just righteous and perennial, the answer to these ills that plague society. You invest time, care, and commitment to these neighborhoods. Not more police, not more surveillance, but that's where money's at. That's where immediate solutions are at. So that's what we get.
TCC, time, care, and commitment. I like the way you phrase that. So moving on to our next story, you had an update regarding the stories coming out of Mexico with the cartels that we talked about. I think it was last week.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to bring that up? Actually, you have an English it looks like it's translated in English here. Let me pull it up here.
Sweet. Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. Google Translate does a pretty good job. All right. So this is there's a couple of things I've shared on my Facebook and a couple of things I retweet. I went on the retweeting route on Twitter because for example, like TYT claims that certain journalists are being paid by the Russian state, which is slanderous and liable, and I think opens them up to a lawsuit, which I don't know why they wouldn't walk it back.
Well, I don't know why Mate hasn't. I don't know why Mate hasn't filed a lawsuit against them with the damage that they've done.
Right. But Aaron Mate is kind of low key saying there's been staged attacks on a massive conspiratorial level, which is also a hard thing to verify. He's focused on the report and the cover up. So like everyone, we find real things and we extrapolate maybe, further to things that, might open you up to lawsuits or whatnot. I don't want to say that the governor of Tamaulipas is lying here. Okay, so I guess that's where I'm going with all this. But he's a liar, and
there you said it.
Well, he's a politician. So there was we talked about the mass shooting that happened in Reynosa on June 19th, and that was right after the lower chamber elections in Mexico, and we knew that the energy crisis, the fossil fuel corruption narrative that we were touching on in Illinois around Madigan and around ComEd, how that connected to Texas, and a lot of these names connected to what was going on with Pemex and Tamaulipas with the energy sector there with this governor. Well, now after this mass shooting in Reynosa, bear in mind that violence happens in Reynosa, in Tamaulipas all the time that never gets solved. This was a massive shooting where 17 civilians were killed by armed men. At a press conference, the governor reiterated his solidarity with the families of the victims and condemned the events, as well as affirming that in his government, there is not, nor will there be any spaces for crime. There will be no truce against the violence. Real Ray Lopez energy. He highlighted 39 actions by the Secretary of Public Security and the Attorney General's Office of the State of Tamaulipas as part of the investigation to resolve the case. This was part of his report to arrest the alleged criminals. After a series of arrests were carried out by the Tamaulipas Security Secretary and the Special Operations Groups, only yesterday they announced the capture of 8 more people, allegedly the intellectual and or material authors of the criminal acts in June 19th. So not only did they kill shooters on the scene, they've captured the masterminds. Among them will be a high criminal profile of the Gulf cartel that, due to its dangerousness and capacity to generate violence, was one of the priority objectives of the State Attorney General's office, for which 2 million pesos were offered as reward for information that led to his capture. To these important arrests are added action of investigation, prosecution, prevention of crime by state authorities that in a few days have led to a total of 19 people arrested, as well as the seizure of 37 vehicles, 46 chargers, 136 metal stars, 882 useful cartridges, and 13 firearms of various calibers, among other relevant seizures. I do have to read this part. What is in the lawsuit is federal competence. So the governor said that the criminal phenomenon should be understood, and the antagonistic groups are not fighting for value or honor, but fighting for loot, which coincidentally lies in federal crimes such as racking, drugs, arms, and human trafficking, as well as hydrocarbons. Okay. It's important to understand the criminal phenomenon, the behavior. They are not disputing. Okay, he's just going off his high horse here. We have indicated this and his extensive competence of the Federation, despite the fact that the state police acted on different occasions that have to do with migrant smuggling. And another less important issue has to do with the border crossings and what comes from north to south, and has to do with the trafficking, not only in arms money, but also hydrocarbons, the smuggling of hydrocarbons that is extremely lucrative, and that is part of the criminal groups that are being disputed is once again under federal jurisdiction. So the governor that has an arrest warrant out for him, by the way, that the federal government has indicated he should be turning himself into court for questioning, is now flexing on the fact that his state police have captured the people responsible for this massacre, and that it's now part of a larger cartel war operation that ties together the border crisis that the Republicans are kind of up in arms about. This is a huge problem for AMLO, whose federal institutions have varying degrees of wanting to work with them, much like you saw during the Trump years. governors and federal agencies could buck the president in different ways. People can argue whether it's justified or not. AMLO has gotten the criticism of overstepping, his federal powers, and one of the major sticking points has been in his pursuit of arresting this governor. And now with this situation, the legitimacy of the governor's role in the state and his way of handling crime in the state, it's going to get a lot more narrative support, I think, is the goal of this. So it's the other thing I want to bring up is that August 1st, there's going to be a federal election in Mexico that is not getting the airtime that it should. There's one time on this story here. This is going to be a huge event for major democracies across the world if it works out in the way that the Morena party hopes for it to work out. What it is a federal referendum on the federal government's ability to prosecute former federal administrations and government actors. So he's talking about former presidents, Felipe Calderón, Vicente Fox, Peña Nieto. He's talking about former generals, like we saw General Lagos, that we saw a lot of drama with them, while during the transition of power in the U.S. And he's already arrested, and a real trial of prosecution is underway for the former CEO of Pemex, who led an Odebrecht-style bribing scandal to have a monopoly on the energy grid in Mexico. Lozoya, that CEO, Lozoya, has indicated this governor, Cabeza de Vaca, as instrumental in his operation of bribing officials in order to have a monopoly on Mexico. So Cabeza de Vaca is another huge domino in the Morena party's project to legitimize Mexico's democracy in a round-up kind of way, to actually empower the courts and police system to go after corrupt officials and not just a perennial cartel war. That's going to be a problem as we head into July. And Cabeza de Vaca has, this new ground of legitimacy. He was protected because of immunity granted to him because of his position. His party, the PAN, controlled the state legislator that sided with him during the recent election. They lost control of the state legislator. The new legislator has indicated they will be working with the federal government, against the charges levied against the governor. But the current legislator that is still in power until August 1st has extended immunity until the governor finishes his term. So there's a lot of lawfare happening in Mexico. There's a lot of narrative wars between corporate legitimate media and social media and media that's seen as too state friendly to AMLO, and that's being used in European governments to paint them as some kind of dictator. But all of this has to do with accountability to corruption around the energy grid, around the cartels, around the police state. And the narrative that, crime is increasing in urban spaces because of gang wars is something that we're going to see in Chicago as well. And, I'm calling Cabeza de Vaca, a bullshitter on this. I think Lori knows that people in Chicago are not going to just fall for any old narrative around gang violence, is my hope. But this is a concern just because if it exacerbates and obfuscating a narrative of holding former officials accountable and going into July, that August 1st referendum might fail. The federal organization in Mexico that is holding the federal referendum is not promoting it because they claim they don't have the resources to promote it, despite having access to free airtime on several radio and national channels. But they really don't want to promote it. It'd be a huge mark to have the public weigh in on a decision like that. Imagine in the U.S. if we do something like that on Medicare for all. Just an open-ended vote on a single issue like that. And then that becomes the law of the land. So, I think there's a real test to democracy fighting, the major ills of everything urban humanity happening in Mexico. And that tends to tie back to Chicago. So that's kind of why I like to give people updates on this story.
Yeah, no, we think the corruption is bad over here. Boy, when you delve into what's happening down in Mexico, as far as the cartels and the energy grid and all the corruption amongst these government officials, it's like it's a total deep dive in keeping track of all the players.
Yeah,
and how
yeah.
And
so,
the questions.
There is people in Tamaulipas don't know what to believe, but the governor, as a member, elected officials have said that if any of this violence ties back to the governor, in any way, police covering up any malfeasance in this case, that they're going to be demanding his resignation immediately. Like there's very little trust in the narratives that either sides are putting out in Mexico, and it tends to be who has the money and resources to have their narrative win out.
Very good. Have you heard of Soren Spicknell? Have you heard of this gentleman?
No.
Soren Spicknell is a software engineer in Chicago, IIT student. I found this story on Block Club Chicago, and I found it inspiring. And as we report on all these other stories, I thought that this was a story I wanted to share that's inspiring, that speaks to what we are constantly facing with the horrible realities of our segregated city here in Chicago. And this is part of a series of articles that Blog Club Chicago has been covering. This is actually part 2. I also read part 1, but I found some of the quotes in part 2 of their series really quite humbling. So I'm gonna read from the Block Club Chicago series, which was written by Tonika Johnson and Maria Crisan. IIT student was told don't go past 35th Street. He ignored the advice and found a home on the south side. I want to go through the article, and then we can kind of talk about it to kind of come to the end of the show, because I think that there's some really important and inspirational lessons to be learned here. Instead of making assumptions about the people living in unfamiliar and purportedly unsafe neighborhoods, one resident learned important lessons about humanity. As part of the Folded Map Project, Tonika Lewis Johnson and sociologist Maria Crisan interviewed 30 people about how they first confronted and eventually combated harmful narratives about Chicago's South and West Sides. Block Club Chicago is publishing 5 of these stories. We invite you to join us on June 30th on YouTube for Making Chicago's Segregation Personal, a live conversation about neighborhood stereotypes. I think we're going to have to follow that when that comes up. Today's the 29th. That's tomorrow. So I'll keep an eye on that, see if we can update this on Friday. But this comes from Bronzeville. When Soren Spicknell began attending the Illinois Institute of Technology campus, security leaders and fellow students imparted a critical piece of advice. Don't leave campus. Basically treat this like an island, Spicknell said. New to the city, at first he heeded the advice not to go past 35th, but the longer he lived here and listened to the language people used to talk about neighborhoods, he realized some of the geographic boundaries weren't really geographic, and that north side, west side, south side, those were all shorthand for something else. And that something was race. Gradually, Spicknell pushed himself to challenge the perceptions of race shaped by his upbringing in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Alabama, and deconstruct the coded messaging that taught him to fear non-white neighborhoods. It started simply, going to a coffee shop in Washington Park. It's a part of the city, just like any other. Spicknell said his parents were welcoming and open-minded, but looking back on his childhood, he had limited opportunities to forge relationships with people who weren't white. I didn't have a lot of interaction with people whose races were different from mine, but I had been taught through my parents and through friends groups about broader experiences besides mine, he said. And my views of those experiences were kind of childlike. They were based on anecdotes and statistics rather than having actually been around people who were substantially different than me. And as someone who grew up on the North Shore, I can completely understand where he's coming from. He doesn't remember anyone telling him to be afraid of black people in spaces, but the implied message already had seeped in when he was a kid going to his first concert in Detroit. I remember there was a train passing overhead in an overpass at one point when we were driving into Detroit, and I thought, oh my God, a robber's going to jump off that train. Because I was 8 years old, he said. Even at 8 years old, this has been drilled into me that Detroit was a dangerous place. And I don't think my parents ever said that directly, but like we had local news in the background. He realized he was being programmed to believe the same thing about Chicago when he got to IIT in 2014. Don't go south of 35th Street, the message puzzled him because he remembered journeying off campus and walking freely to and from a hotel with his mom during a visit earlier that year. And as he put it, I didn't die. So Spicknall started venturing past the borders, in part because people told him not to. He carried a camera with him and likens his initial approach to exploring off-limits parts of the city to ruins photography he produced at the time, gravitating towards empty buildings in disinvested neighborhoods. Where people think that if they have the guts to bring their camera in the middle of whatever neighborhood they're supposed to be afraid of, that it's inherently a revolutionary act, and that's inherently going to make anything better, he said. Early on, when I lived in Chicago, that was me. He eventually started doing more than just passing through, inspired by a need to find a more convenient place to work in between classes. He got sick of going downtown just to get coffee because I would go all the way to the dollop behind Harold Washington Library to get a cup of coffee and study. With a little research, he discovered Currency Exchange Cafe on Garfield Boulevard, right next to the Green Line. He admits he was afraid. Yes, I was, and I'm 100% comfortable talking about that, but nothing sinister happened. He was in spaces that were casual and social, and ordering a drink, and then working on my homework, overhearing folks just talk about the garden they were working on, or getting their kid into a good school, and all of that, he said. And that solidified in my mind. Oh, it's just a neighborhood. They're just people. When you're 8 years old and forming your opinions about the world with no direct experiences to counter them, you end up worrying about robbers jumping off trains when you go to or through black spaces. Sociological and psychological studies show that whites in particular make assumptions about places based on their racial composition, concluding that white spaces are all good and black spaces are all bad. That shorthand is created and recreated through our social interactions and networks, research shows. I think that it comes down to the personal. They are reinforced by collective ignorance, Spicknall said. Like one person says, it's dangerous down here, and then the next person repeats that. And nobody in the picture has ever seen what the corner of 47th and King looks like, let alone like 79th and Jeffrey or like Altgeld Gardens or down in Beverly. All of these places that are so significantly different from each other and can't be captured by any one description or one racialized shorthand. At a place like IIT, where technology is king, many used crime data to support their opinions. They would overlook critical history about segregation, under-resourced neighborhoods, and other factors that can lead to crimes such as redlining and discriminatory bank lending practices. There was a lot of use of crime statistics as the basis for everything, he said. Crime statistics were like the gospel of I don't go there. Like it's, oh, the numbers say if I stick here within the campus and then I go buy a condo in Lakeview and I never touch this part of the city for the rest of my life, I'll be better off. And that's devotion to the statistically rational was very prevalent in that community. For most people, somebody who is in that position of trust needs to tell them that doesn't actually match reality, and here's why. And without an established personal trust, I think it's a lot harder. It's like shouting into a void. For Spicknall, the past several years have been a journey to exploring the mundane ways he learned to make assumptions about people and places to intentionally combat misconceptions that easily can be mistaken for reality. Instead of walking around making assumptions about the people living in these unfamiliar and purportedly unsafe neighborhoods, he learned important lessons about humanity. The process of interacting with neighborhoods is less of a quest, which I think was kind of how I approached it early on. And now it's like it's living in the place that I live, he said. And it's understanding that place comes with a range of complexities and people who have competing priorities, and that race and class and density and crime are not the definition of the people. He's living in Kenwood these days, but is planning a move to Pullman. I can continue to have experiences that are not filled with people who've had the same experience as me, and that's extremely valuable to me, he said. there could have been a world in which my knowledge of the South Side and my interactions with the South Side and the West Side never grew beyond like the infantile stages of ruins porn and thrill seeking. And I could have lived in Wicker Park and then occasionally journeying down to Calumet Fisheries and said, I'm better than all the rest of you who live in Wicker Park because I know that I can get good fish at Calumet Fisheries and I've been to the South Side. But now I live in a wonderful place and it's just a neighborhood that I live in. And there are some things that are good about it. There are some things that are bad about it. And it's my neighborhood and I value the things that I like about it. And I wish I could change the things that I don't like about it. And it's a part of the city just like any other. And I think we can take that last quote from Soren and relate it to all of our neighborhoods that we live in. And I think one of the reasons this particular article from Block Hub really spoke to me was that I can relate to everything he shared about what you're told before going into other communities. I, again, grew up on the North Side, kind of shifted into living in the city, Lakeview. Now I'm in Little India up north. But I had an opportunity, I think 8 or 9 years ago, to venture to the South and West Sides. I had volunteered with the night ministry that sends a food bus to these neighborhoods to give out coffee, food, provide nursing services. And it was an eye-opener. These are not dangerous places that are drilled into our heads. Certainly any neighborhood has its dangers. You have shootings all over the city. But being able to separate and just meet the people and see the communities, and everybody's just living their lives the way we do in our neighborhoods. And that experience further intensified for me when I volunteered on Amara Enya's mayoral campaign in 2015. And I spent a lot of time, again, South and West Sides, shooting video and producing video. And I used to joke I was the token whitey in the group because I was the only white face down there. And it's like I didn't care. It's like just meeting other people and recognizing there's no differences other than the color of our skins that people point to, which shouldn't be any kind of a difference, is what inspired me to hear this story of Soren Spicknell and try to end the show with something for everyone to think about, our preconceived notions of neighborhoods and in what we all, I think, agree is unfortunately probably one of the most segregated cities in the nation. As we read these stories of crime every day, as we read these stories of fear and loathing and police violence and gang shootings and everybody caught in the crossfire, I just thought this article, and I want to thank Blog Club Chicago and Tanika and Maria for this series that they are presenting in telling these stories of people that have gone from their comfort zone neighborhoods into other neighborhoods to prove that there's no difference other than the walls you build in your own mind because of preconceived notions that are drilled into you for what you could argue are well-intentioned reasons of safety, from white cultures trying to protect their kids. And it's just it really is very thought-provoking. And I wanted to share it and pass it to you for some of your thoughts. There's a lot to unwrap, I know.
Thanks. I mean, like I know I'm a cynic. I don't want to be. I've always seen Chicago as as a city in pain and war, and I didn't understand why. And then the more I studied it, the more it seemed like that was purposeful. It's I call it white supremacy, but it's really just supremacy. It's capitalism. It's maintaining the city, a hierarchy. I don't know if I feel enough of Chicago changing for me to not be so cynical. Ed Burke is someone that I fixate on because of the historical importance that he is still embroiled in. But it's the home city, it's the home apparatus, all of it that does what Chicago does. In these stories that we share. It does give me hope when the new generation, wants to challenge those norms and do something else, So more of this from Block Club Chicago. Some people might call it, gentrification stories, but I think that it's a needed perspective that people from neighborhoods need to know that not everybody that's moving into, it's not it's not gentrifiers themselves that is the issue with gentrification. It's the process of that. We see how capitalism picks and chooses and coerces people into lanes of subjugation or absentmindedly just winning and consuming. Young people like this guy challenging what they grew up in is something that I ultimately is my hope that we'll fix Chicago. We fix Chicago, we can fix America. We fix America, we can fix the world. Thanks.
I agree with you, and I think the key word that you've used throughout your thoughts on this particular topic and article are hope. I think I'm always going to be cynical. I always describe myself as the pessimistic optimist or the optimistic pessimist. But I do think that when we see a new generation going into these neighborhoods, not to gentrify, but to reach out and experience that everybody's the same. The first article in this series had to do with a woman who opened up her art gallery down on the south side, and I think that she was originally in Lakeview or one of the north side neighborhoods. And she didn't let that stop her from opening her art gallery because her art spoke to all races, all people, and it showed that she was breaking through that stigma, that boundary of, well, is what you have to share going to appeal to people of color? And of course it does, as much as things that people of color have to share will appeal to white people. So, keyword there is hope. And I think that, let's try to cling to that as much as we see the rest of the things that drive our fear and loathing here in the Windy City. That's nice the way I tied that up, huh?
Pretty good.
Anyway, we had a good show tonight. We're coming up on almost an hour and a half. I want to thank Jose, as always, for joining me for our Tuesday night segments on fear and loathing in the Windy City. I'll be back again on Friday night with a weekly news wrap-up. I don't have any guests scheduled, but if we do, we'll certainly announce it in our social media, especially Facebook, after my suspension is lifted tomorrow. And I want to thank Mark Zuckerberg for preventing us from being able to promote our broadcast tonight on our Facebook pages. Thanks, Mark. You son of a bitch. Anyway, so that's our wrap up for our show tonight. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy our show. We really hope you'll share it. Those of you that aren't banned or suspended from Facebook, Twitter, any other social network platforms, please share links to our show. Like and subscribe. Always, you can send us story tips at the links that are in our show notes below. If it's happening on the streets, you'll hear about it here on Chicago Corner. Thanks to everybody for joining us tonight in the live stream, and be safe, Chicago. Thanks, Jose.
Thanks, Jerry. Take care, everyone.